18th round of the 2003 Champ Car season took place in the land down under, Australia. As outlined in the Mexico City race review, the championship was the talking point coming into this weekend. Paul Tracy would be able to lock up his first ever Champ Car championship with a finish of first or second. Bruno Junqueira, meanwhile, needed to leave this weekend with a less than 21-point gap to Tracy. Really, all Tracy needed to do is just finish ahead of Junqueira in the race and he would be your champion for 2003. Bruno knew what was at stake and was a man on a mission this weekend, coming out guns blazing and grabbing the bonus point for setting the fastest time in Friday qualifying. But the man playing spoilers was his own teammate Sebastian Bourdais, who'd grab his 5th pole position on the year on Saturday. Bruno would start alongside. Tracy, meanwhile, would start just behind them in 3rd. Michel Jourdain Jr., who was a massive long shot entering this weekend, would qualify in 9th, taking none of the qualifying bonus points and thus being mathematically eliminated from championship contention. With that, it was now a true 2-horse race. Jeff Boss would be your 19th and last place starter. Outside the championship fight, there were some other storylines, like the return of Roberto Moreno, but considering what's at stake this weekend, I doubt many of you give a rat's ass. With heavily overcast skies and a threat of rain, the stage was set for what could be a dramatic championship deciding race. With everything taken care of, we can get to the start of the race. Yet again this season we'd have a failed start, as Bruno Junqueira jumped the green by a country mile while Sebastian Bourdais was trundling around at a snail's pace. The team meddling was obvious, and Paul Tracy was a bit ticked off. Take 2 this time around and we'd actually grab the green. The green flag would fly with some Newman-Haas trickery as Bourdais laying his teammate into the lead. But heading into the first corner, there was some more Newman-Haas drama, as Sebastian Bourdais sent Paul Tracy into a spin. As the field stacked up behind, Oriol Servia was sent into the tire barriers, taking himself out of the race. The Servia incident was a big break for Tracy, as the yellow came out with it. Tracy would restart the race at the tail end of the field, but he was still on the lead lap. The race was restarted on lap 4, with Bruno Junqueira in the lead quickly pulling away. Meanwhile, farther behind, Tiago Monteiro would pull into the pits with a gearbox issue, knocking him out of the race. While all of this was going on, Paul Tracy was making his way through the field, clawing up to 13th. But the encroaching return of a pissed-off PT wasn't the scariest thing. The weather was. Rain was being reported just a few miles away, and it was becoming a matter of when, not if, as to the rain approaching the track. But despite that, the controversial start was still on people's minds. There was a steward's inquiry as to whether or not Bourdais took an unjustifiable risk with his botched move on Tracy, but didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, as around lap 12, Bourdais slammed into the wall coming out of the first chicane, smoke screening the track in the process. Considering how everyone else was slipping around at the same time, it's pretty obvious what was causing it. The rain was here, and soon enough it was absolutely pouring. The field would flood into the pits during the ensuing yellow, where Tracy would actually gain 2 positions to make his way up into the top 10. However, right after the stops is when the weather got much worse. What started off as rain soon turned into a deluge, and then turned into a hailstorm. The rain was so bad that even running behind the safety car was sketchy, so less than 15 laps into the race the red flag would come out. The red flag was an hour long, during which most of the time was spent trying to dry the track. The rain was gone after about 15 minutes. The rest of it just saw course workers sweeping waves of water into drains, and pit crew members squeegeeing their pit boxes. It was still an hour-long hold on the race, which would result in the race distance being shortened from the planned 65 laps to only 47. After quite some time, the cars were refired, and soon enough the field was ready to retake the green in the rain. On lap 17, the race was restarted, but almost immediately the yellow returned after a spin install for Mika Salo in the final corner. Paul Tracy managed to pick off 2 cars in the process, passing both Salo and Darren Manning, who had to check up to avoid hitting the fin. After Salo was restarted, the race was back underway again, but all hell broke loose right after the restart. Roberto Moreno lost it trying to pass Alex Tagliani, spinning the both of them around. In trying to get spun around in the right direction, Tagliani would run into Paul Tracy. Paul was now pinned between Alex Tagliani and Darren Manning, and he tried to break free, but in doing so he hit Tagliani's stopped car with his right rear, breaking his suspension. Despite the damage being pretty significant on Paul's car, the team would still attempt to repair it. Walter Salas also spun during all of that, but I doubt that even Dale Coyne Racing cared about it, much less everyone else. The next restart came around on lap 22, and while Mario Haberfeld spun around in the final corner, Rodolfo Levin and Mika Salo made contact, giving Levin a puncture and Salo a broken front wing. Thankfully for all of us, the race started to settle down a little bit. That, I think, is the first time that's been said in this entire series. Around the halfway mark, there's still plenty of things to touch on, though. Tracy was back in the race, but was 3 laps down. Junqueira, meanwhile, was still comfortably at the front and soon clinched the bonus point for leading the most amount of laps. Not to mention the final round of pit stops was quickly approaching, the sun was back, and a dry line was beginning to form. A lot of things were set to change in the second half of this race. Even despite Bruno Junqueira dropping down to 3rd after Michel Jourdain Jr. and Adrian Fernandez overtook him, it was still looking good for Bruno. However, the complexion of the race changed not very long after this, as Alex Tagliani spun and stalled while Mario Haberfeld was stopped on track. The 6th yellow of the race was out, and with the pit window closing in just 5 laps, most of the field came into the pits during this. I say most, the American Team Spirit Johansson team stayed out, meaning Ryan Hunter-Reay and Jimmy Vasser were now 1-2. It was a gamble to be sure, as their tires were a few laps older, but it's not a bad gamble considering how the race has gone thus far. The chaos we've come to expect from the restart seemed to come early this time, as before the race was even restarted, Mario Dominguez lost his right rear tire going down the back straightaway. But once the errant tire was retrieved, the race was set to be restarted with 12 laps to go on lap 36. While the American Team Spirit Johansson cars accompanied by Darren Manning start to pull away, the attention was on the rest of the field. Bruno Junqueira was under a microscope for cutting the first chicane on the restart, but much like his teammate earlier, it didn't matter. 1 lap after the restart, Bruno Junqueira's car was destroyed in the runoff area of the first chicane. It was a single car accident, although Mario Haberfeld was involved in a separate crash around the same time. It was just Bruno's 2nd DNF of the year, but it hurt the most. With that crash, it all but assured the championship for Paul Tracy. Despite that, the race was far from over, and with 7 laps to go, the green flag was back out for a few moments. Adrian Fernandez was down the barriers, and the 8th full course yellow was out. After Fernandez's car was refired and the broken front wing was picked off the track, the race was set to be restarted with 4 laps to go. Ryan Hunter-Reay needed a good restart, and that's exactly what he got. As Vasser and Darren Manning began to battle in his mirrors, Hunter-Reay began to drive off into the sunset. After leading only 15 laps on the day, the first 15 in his Champ Car career, Ryan Hunter-Reay would cross the line in first to win the 2003 Lexmark Indy 300. Darren Manning would finish in a close second, with Jimmy Vasser finishing in third. Paul Tracy would finish in 13th and was officially your 2003 Champ Car Series champion. A special shout out goes to Dale Coyne Racing. Walter Salas, who brought home in 6th, and Jeff Balls, who finished in 9th, got the best results of their respective Champ Car careers. Truly a highlight weekend from Dale Coyne this season. That was one hell of a race. Very chaotic to be sure, but amazing to watch as well. A race full of storylines, good, bad, and ugly, was a shining light from the year. But the man of the day is without a doubt Paul Tracy. After over a decade racing in the top echelons of American open wheel, Tracy was now a Champ Car champion. And to do with the race to spare as well just about sums up his year. Tracy was overcome with emotion in the crowning moment from his best IndyCar season. And can you really blame him? As Bob Varsha said towards the end of the broadcast, Tracy's career had now come full circle. We've hit a stride towards the end of the season, and we just had one of the best races from the year. But even though we have a championship that's already locked up, I have a feeling that we still have a fantastic race knocking on our front door. Next up on the calendar to bring the season to a close is a 500-mile race in Fontana. It's been quite a long time since we had some balls-to-the-wall oval racing, so I'm really excited for what next week can bring. Oh, the Fontana race got canceled because of wildfires. Well, good night, everybody.